Kim Frohsin was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, and went on to study at l'Institut pour les Etudiants Etrangers in Aix-en-Provence, France, and then San Diego State University, where she earned her BA in Humanities and French. Please pardon my French, I'm not very good.
Ça va.
She later earned her BFA from the Academy of Art College in San Francisco in 1988. She has received numerous awards and honor throughout her over 30-year career, including nominations for the 2014 Joan Mitchell Foundation Fellowship Grant, the 2013 Fleishhacker Foundation Eureka Fellowship, and the 1995 SECA Award at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. Kim's works can be found in numerous private, corporate, and public collections, including the Crocker Art Museum, the San Jose Museum of Art, the Monterey Museum of Art, the Harnett-Hall Gallery at Minot State University, and the Bolinas Museum and the Crystal Bridges Museum of Art in Bentonville, Arkansas. San Francisco-based painter Sandy Ostrau earned her BA from the University of California, Santa Barbara. She has earned awards from the Gualala Art Center in 2004, 2006, 2008, and 2011. They really like you up there.
I think they do. I've been up there a lot.
So, as well as an honorable mention in the statewide painting competition exhibition at the Triton Museum in Santa Clara, California in 2012. Her works have been exhibited extensively in California and the East Coast and can be found in many private collections. And with that, I will turn it over to Sandy to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you. So nice to be here. Thank you, Greg and Colleen and Matt. And I'm so thrilled to be here. When Greg asked me and all of you for coming, it's great to see all these faces, many familiar. And when Greg asked me to participate in this lovely conversation, I was thrilled. I thought, what an honor to be here to talk with Kim. And not only is Kim an artist that has inspired me for many years and truly one of my very favorite artists, she's also a friend. And I have been lucky enough to have gotten to know her over the years, and we really do have a nice friendship. When I first encountered Kim's work, I was a new oil painter, and a friend of mine, and this was it was after this body of work in the 2000s, probably 2005-ish, and a friend of mine, another figurative painter, and at the time I was doing figure painting with a group, and I was doing a lot of landscape painting, and I saw a friend introduced me to her work, gave me a catalog, and I was just really astounded, mesmerized, and pretty blown away. I, of course, was familiar with Bay Area figurative artists and the Society of Six plein air painters. And when I saw Kim's work, I saw the third generation of Bay Area figurative. And she was, a San Francisco-based artist, and I hadn't met her yet, but I just studied her work. And in her work, I think you probably all would agree, what I found was an authenticity and a voice of a compilation of not only technical skill and academic training, which can be, you can be very well academically trained, and if that's all that you need, and accuracy in like figuration, then biology textbooks would be, or anatomy textbooks would be in museum walls. But it was the merging of her intuition and intuitive painting and the style, and I felt such a personal expression from her work. Mm-hmm. And it kind of embodied everything that I was looking for in wanting to move forward in my work. So I at that point, I was painting and reviewing her catalogs and really admiring her work. I'd seen some live. I went to the Crocker Museum, and she has a piece there. It's beautiful, grasshopper pie, right? Beautiful piece. And I think at that point I had already met you. But after, we ended up having a show together. And I had met her, I think at a couple receptions we had met. And I thought, and we were talking, and I understood how, you know, such an accomplished artist, but she's brilliant. Just a brilliant. But it's true, and I'm not the only one. I mean, everybody that knows her. So anyway, so she has had a great influence on my work, and then we had the opportunity to show together, and that was with Thomas Reynolds, who is San Francisco Gallery on film or off of Fillmore on Pine Street, and I've been one of his artists for. He's now in Santa Barbara, but when he was here in San Francisco for I think since about 2010, and then we had a show, and we also had a chance to speak, and. Paul Karlstrom, our friend and renowned art historian and writer, was our moderator. And so that was a wonderful experience. And then since then, we've just become friends. And
you've really nicely been collecting an
eclectic I haven't gotten to that part yet.
Which I appreciate. And
I think on count, as I left the house, there were 14 pieces.
Oh my gosh.
So
see, I mean, this is rare. This is really, you know.
So
three galleries, which is like, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they just adorn my house, and I see them every day and study them.
So
They're beautiful drawings and paintings. But the funny story is my husband, who he's not here today, picking up my daughter, but so for his birthday for many years, I get him a birthday present of a piece of art, and many of them have been Kim Frohsin's.
I know.
And then another connection, so as we got to know each other, and I'll let you share that. So my husband was born in Atlanta, where Kim was born.
This is like pure kismet. I mean, we just meet, right?
Yeah.
And I met Mark, and somehow we got on, you know, where we were born in Atlanta, and early 60s. I'm 61, Northwest Atlanta. We have German Jews on my Frohsin side, and he's like, I didn't know there were Russian Jews, and then the private clubs, and long story short, we're like birthed by the same Dr. Walter Krugman. And it was just like, you know how a story will just go down to like, who you out. So yeah, that was fun. I mean, how random was that?
And the Frohsin store, my mother-in-law would talk about, my husband didn't live in Atlanta too long, just he was a young child, but she would shop at this wonderful store in Atlanta that was pretty famous, and she said she couldn't buy only special occasion pieces there, but she remembers shopping at Frohsin's.
Yeah, Leon Frohsin's. That was my paternal grandfather's store in Atlanta. And actually, when I was thinking about this talk, and because this work is, you know, 30 years old, and then it made me have to think, okay, what lit up, and you have to review your life, or I did, to get to here, and then anyway, afterward. But yeah, it made me think about, Frohsin's, you know, Leon Frohsin, my grandfather, and being around couture, and anyway, that's a creative start when you're a child.
Absolutely.
So.
And do you remember the first piece of art that you made? And do you also, were there any special family members or teachers that kind of helped your art journey?
Definitely.
Artistic journey?
Yeah, and back as a child too. Yeah, it made me again to think back on, I had great support in my family, and from Frohsin's, just even starting and being around couture and beauty and jewelry and all that as a child, it's just sort of there. And then I got to my mom, my grandparents. I had grandparents in Georgia and Sea Island, Georgia and Atlanta, and in California. I had 3 sets. I was lucky. And they were all always supportive of art and making art. And like I think I told you, even down when I was a child in Sea Island in the summers, my grandparents had cocktail parties. It was a whole, 60s era. And they'd say, Kim, make the sign for the door so the guests can come in. And that kind of, just as a child making art. And it was always encouraged. And to flip ahead to schooling, I got to go to the Westminster schools in Atlanta. It was a private prep school, and from pre-first to 12th grade. And it made me think about, Mrs. Carnes. And she was like the art teacher from pre-first till AP art in college. In high school at the end, 12th. And when you asked me that about my first artwork, I thought, oh gosh. Yeah, 2nd grade, I got singled out for a rocket, an Apollo rocket drawing, because I did the curly Q exhaust with a marker. And then in 4th grade, Miss Whitener, the Mayflower, I got to stand up. And these things come up when you're,
And you had a teacher that...
Yeah, well, and then my mom, I'm wearing her shirt today. She resourced the funds to allow me in our neighborhood, not far away. Mrs. Gold had a trailer in the back of her yard, and she taught oil painting with a major, Atlanta, a Coke machine and an air conditioner. And I was 10, 11, and 12, and to be taught oil painting as a child and then be able to be safe, just walk home with your palette that you put in the freezer afterward. And then, I don't know if you know, but she became Faye Gold. And if you know that name, you can just look her up. She literally, they say, when her gallery opened in 80, I think, who knew that she would go on to do that? But, she's my childhood art teacher after school on Monday afternoons. But Faye Gold,
very famous
gallerist. She put fine art in the southeast of the United States. So I had that kind of, and I just found a little daffodil pointillist painting at home a couple weeks ago that she signed, Kim, for me.
Wow.
Because that was 72, so I was 11. So that kind of, I had some, even young.
Getting
really,
the chops young.
Yeah, really, very nice, really wonderful influences.
And then you went to San Diego, as we learned, biography.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me you felt like San Diego was kind of an art and architectural desert.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was the way your opportunity to go to France.
Right.
And in France, you were exposed to so much, immersed in culture, art, architecture. And I see it in your work, and I'm looking here, and I really see Bonnard and Viard and, Cézanne, the artist Matisse. There's some Matisse blue in here, I think.
Lots of blue.
Lots of blue.
Yeah.
How would you, I see the influence, and how would you, how did that affect your that whole experience in France?
Well, let's see. I'm sorry, I have to look at some of this. This is like your life. And then I can't see very well. I'm just gonna bear with me.
You're doing good.
But to expand a little on that, after growing up in Atlanta, and I luckily had been able to spend all of my high school summers in La Jolla, in San Diego. So that's how I got my taste of this coast and the mentality of California. And I knew graduating in 79, and I had a choice of where to go. I wanted to go west. And I knew, because I was like, I think I'm done with the South. It was great, but anyway, that's how and also I went, as far as art influences, it was really important for my graduation high school gift. You know, you could ask for something, at least back in those days. Who knows what kids ask for now? But I got a Pentax K1000 35 millimeter camera that I taught myself how to use. Because photography has always been like a tool and part of all of my art. And to this day, even though now ubiquitous, everyone has a phone camera. But so that was important. And again, Mom drove me when we drove across country in 79 when all the, gas lines, I remember, because there was some, thing going on. And made my way, because I got into San Diego State, which then had a brand new art department. So, yeah, I didn't know so that's how I, for the forces of wanting to leave, and then also an art department, and that's how I ended up there. But like you said, I just like bikes and beaches and surfing and rigging. I don't know. It was just like, it was, where's the art? And I would hang out in Balboa Park for art and like Hillcrest, the neighborhood back, this is like 79, 80. Because I thought, where's some culture? Where's some of that diversity? And I had studied AP French too, so I had this like, there's gotta be, now we know the word cosmopolitan, some kind of culture. Where is that? So I ended up, because of the boyfriend I had, I sort of was ho-hum on the art department. I did the prerequisites, but I decided I gravitated toward humanities and French again. And those things were like, I got in they had an exchange program.
And you were there for several months.
Aix-en-Provence. It was more. It was Aix-en-Provence, France. And yeah, so that's 1983. And I lived in the old part of Aix-en-Provence, which is Cézanne's world and everything. And it wasn't until I got back afterward, I realized that 11 Boulgans, where I lived, Cézanne died in the room next door at 13 Boulgans. I found it in a life book, one of those Lifetime Life. I could not believe it. So, I mean, the proximity
That's crazy.
to artists, I know, things like that. And just the exposure, you're right, in a nutshell. Traveling and Do
you feel that there's that influence of that time even in this body of work?
Well, it carries through because that's like, definitely. So, I had the French influence. I soaked up the architecture, travel, linguistics, exposure to, I remember, I lived in Aix. I got to live in a 800 AD Charlemagne Bory in Gordes because I got invited in that summer to study on the property of my philosophy French teacher, Monsieur North. And all this,
incredible.
It's like osmosis, right? And that's how my art has been. It's intuitive.
Right.
Osmosis. I've never studied theory or under anyone, so it's all like life experience to distill it. But back to, Europe. And then I ended up in Nice. Long story, a friend of a family. I lived for, it seemed like a year, but it was just, I don't know, very rich. 5 months or so.
At that period
in
of
Nice,
time, were you...
4.
Were you like drawing
A
or
little bit, but
Okay.
again, it's mostly just life,
soaking it
and
in.
taking in all of this, and then fluent. I was dreaming in French when I left.
Wow.
I know, it was amazing. And just the exposure, even in Nice, again, I had a bicycle, and I would ride up to where Matisse lived at the, I remember that, it's an old, where the Russians used to vacation, the Saint something. But that's where he died too. And he did his drawings with the stick
Oh, right.
and cutouts, and it's on top of a hill in Nice, Cimier. And then he had been, I know where he had lived down on the waterfront earlier when he corresponded with Bonnard during World War II and Le Canet. So yeah, I mean, I got
And
to
your
live all
knowledge
these places.
of art history, which
That's
I know
important.
it's very important, and
Yeah.
I you could reference different artists from different times in a lot of your work, and I think even in the work here, I know her. I mean, her knowledge is great. I studied art history. Doesn't mean I remember anything, but I was in DC recently, and I would text Kim and say, "Look at this. Do you believe this is that artist?"
You get to be with it.
This one was done before, and so I spent a lot lot of time in the gallery, the museums, like all day.
I know,
in the
it
museums,
seems fantastic
but it
that
was
you can
fun to
do
have
that.
that, and you're,
It
I
does,
loved
it keeps us
having
sharp.
somebody that,
Like our
she knows so
vocabulary.
much. It's just great.
Aw, sweet.
And then you went to San Francisco, and you went to the Academy after France, and
Yeah.
right. And so I mean, there was other things that happened in between, but you got to and around that time in your 30, you were about 30 years old, and you told me, you said you knew, you just almost a self-proclamation, I'm going to be a professional artist, which I think at that time was a very bold statement for a woman to make, and just I really do, and I think I admire that a lot, and I think you knew your track, and you were on that track, and though I think from there this body of work, as you've referred to as your halcyon years, and that period of time, coming with that experience from school and France and life and traveling and living here in North Beach, what do you think was special about that time that this body of work sort of emanated from?
Well, yeah, let's see. I went from France, and then I ended up a little pit stop again, thanks to Mom. I didn't know what I was going to do with those humanities and post-Europe. You're kind of in that crossroads, like,
Right.
What am I going to do? Foreign service? I don't think so. I mean, literally, like, and then my mom, her very simple statement over the phone in Nice said, well, Kim, why don't you come back here and get back into your art? And that's all she needed to say. And it was this public phone in Nice. And long story short, she was living with my my first stepdad on Lake Minnetonka in Minnesota, of all places. So you go from winter in Nice to winter in Minnesota. And that was 85. And that's the time when I just books and drawing, and it was a time of like desperately seeking Susan, Madonna. I was watching Brideshead Revisited. I mean, I had these, and reading Joyce Carol Oates and photographing. And this is the lake where Prince lived, even though Prince wasn't Prince yet. Anyway, so it was this winter, spring, summer, and fall. After that, I applied to the Academy of Art College and got in the illustration department, because back then fine art, what's that? So illustration meant, that's something you make money at. So I started here, and 2 years I started in illustration, but I won the awards for drawing, and I took that, and Barbara Bradley, I said, I don't feel like I fit in this illustration thing. I said, can I go over on Sutter Street and go to the fine art department? She said, Kim, you can do whatever you want. So I did, nice. And that opened up the whole world of printmaking, stone lithography, etching, and my first paintings, really. The only other painting in high school, I did AP. Back then, that's what I wanted to say. Even then, that was E.M. Escher and the photorealists, and, Alphonse Mucha women or something. It was really limited, your knowledge. And then, anyway, flip ahead, you've got Europe and everything. And then, I just got to do. And because of means, my grandmother had died in 1987, so I had this money that most people that age don't have. It wasn't a ton, but it was enough to say, I'm graduating. And I had met who would become my husband, Randall Sexton. And I thought, this is going to be my, like you said, I can do this. And, but I wanted to say what led to this work too, all my, I took that on like really seriously. And I just walking here, I live nearby, and I walked and looked up at the flat that, we had a 3-bedroom flat right here on Mason Street in North Beach, 87 through 99. And I looked up at the room where I was full-time, my first full-time artist. That was my studio in this little room I just passed an hour and a half ago. And it was just weird to look up in there. And I used the closet as our office, typed, paper. And it was like, this is my biz. This is what I do. And, but again, as far as influences in education. So I wrote these down before I knew about Bay Area figuration or anything. By proximity, living here, this gallery was here, which was a resource. It was scary. Barbara Janoff scared the hell out of us coming in here, and it was Charles Campbell, and we're a little intimidated art students. And then we've got the Art Institute up here, which where a lot of Bay Area figurative, Stephen Cora Park, everybody's been up there. But before that, I was really always in my career, books, looking, galleries, museums, and I had a great network of people, friends, and artists. And again, supportive family, the halcyonians, you're married, you're healthy, dogs, live in this neighborhood, not really financial woes. And but as far as what makes your eye and what you grow into having, like my intuitive way, or your way of working, it's by exposure and integrating these, not only the artwork, but I always have liked to read and know about personal lives of all these people.
So you've read a lot of biographies.
I read
We've
took
talked
the whole
about
picture in.
Yeah.
So, I'm pretty self-taught, no methods, workshops, I was my own researcher, documentarian. This is in the era of camera, and drawing and writing and an electric typewriter. No internet. No
simpler times.
Yes. No phone.
So you were
TV.
You were literally making your mark, literally and figuratively, and discovering. It seems to me, and I see this in the work, some experimentation. There's an innocence, yet I see a great maturity, especially for the age that you were in, making this artwork. I find it quite sophisticated and mature, but I also see the experimentation and exploration as you're exploring who you are as an artist. And maybe those simpler times allowed that. You know, you had, like you said, the dogs and the
Randy,
and you were all right here in North
creative.
Beach, and I know we've talked about this before, that you were it wasn't like you were going home and watching TV. You were going home and drawing or reading an art book or reading somebody's biography, and you really walked the walk.
Yeah, and
you
when
know?
we travel, I think about we cover a lot of territory. We'd go off, you know, everything counted. Your art is your life is your art, kind of thing. And even the sojourn to go up to the Marin watershed and, you know, whatever you saw, or the light on the reservoir with that little house, so that became subject matter. I mean, everything was
right,
filtered, came round.
right,
And then on top of it, the influences of place, the light, and the wonderful art. I was just thinking last night, my gosh, these art stores loved me. I had an account up at SFAI and then Michael's. That's where I met my husband. And then just
there was
being able
so
to
much
experiment.
being here in the city. And so the I don't want to say elephant in the room, but kind of the whole Bay Area figurative, right? So they were certainly in your lexicon at the time, and you and we all were, you know,
touched.
Exactly.
Us and
it was. I know that you've talked about, I think this body of work, you were playing with that. You know, you see the influence, you see the you know, color blocks and kind of the use of everyday subject matter and, you know, integrating. I like, you know, where you've integrated, you know, the painting with the figure, and then you've got the you know, as you're dividing the spaces, and you know, and you know, you've honed those skills to such a degree. But I know you've said this was 10 years. Kind of 10 years represents about 10 years of work. You know, kind of through the night, maybe fewer.
Yeah,
but
it's
kind
fewer.
of. But and then it was that experimentation and pushing yourself. What do you want to say? Really honing in on the kind of, you know, your self-expression, Kim Frohsin. And that's kind of where I entered the scene, finding your work
after
and seeing that total confidence. And, you know, that confident mark, it's like, you know, you can make a confident mark that might not be completely accurate, but it will read and have a lot more power than a tentative mark that might be fully accurate. And your work just, you know, when I saw it, it was just like explosive in that way.
Wow.
But I'm going to ask you that question. So which of the Bay Area figurative artists, and I know the answer, and I think I can see the answer pretty clearly, but do you feel most connected to? And also, maybe speak a little bit about that time and how then you moved into your own voice and your own, you know.
Okay. Yeah. Just prior though, I should pay tribute because this again, giving this talk made me like, time travel, or like my neighbors said, travel down memory lane. So it did, and I was telling Greg Flood too that it popped into my mind a few weeks ago that before them or any of it, I had influences, and at the end of school or when I was just starting my full-time art career in the little room up the street, artists like Jim Dine were really important.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and his tools, because I was collecting antique tools, and, you know, you identify, and he was like we said, an unsung hero, and I was like, oh yeah, Jim, you know, and I still have work from that era from his apron, because I had my apron, and I used some of the vocabulary and his visual vocabulary. Jasper Johns, Balthus, Warhol, Rodin, Degas, Camille Claudel, the Society of Six. These are just, I want to say,
Good,
and then
good.
the Avexes, New York, you know, Franz Klein. I remember being up on our roof and, wow, yeah, he killed himself, but look at those blacks, you know, his daring marks. And that made you know, I can still remember thinking that on the roof. Joan Mitchell, The Simplicity of Ellsworth Kelly, the Viennese secessionists like Klimt and Schiele. And on that note, I had totally forgotten, but that before I left Europe, it was supposedly the coldest winter in Europe in 400 years, the winter of 84 before I left. And I wanted to make one last trip to Venice. And there's no one on the piazza, because where the gondolas are, the icicles literally.
Oh, the canals were.
Yeah, it was just incredible.
Oh my
But
gosh.
just to seek warmth on a day, and I was just determined to use my last train ticket or whatever it was in Lira and all that. I wandered into this stone building across the little bridge. I had no idea. I just wanted to get out of the cold. And I had no idea until later what I walked into, and I still had the book I bought, and it's in Italian from that day. It was Egon Schiele drawings.
Oh my God.
All his works on paper. I had no idea who he was, just like I never knew who these people are until later. But I still had that book, and yeah, it was before he became like, you know, really well, you know, he's well known, and but that kind of thing. And I mentioned Matisse, Hopper, Beckman, Giacometti. I actually corresponded in letters with James Lord, who wrote the Giacometti book, because I did things like that with, and I still have his letters on that avion par avion blue paper.
Oh, right.
I had forgotten about that. And also in photography, I just want to pivotal.
Yeah, I
was
was going to ask you about your. Right.
And the old SF MoMA on Van Ness, if you remember, it was really tiny. I mean, they had the photography department was like 2 little hallways. And time traveling for this talk, I remember saying, wow, John Copeland's. And it's when he's older and he's just, there are these, it reminded me of an elephant. But he abstracted his own aging body in these abstract forms, and they're black and white, and
in photographs.
His photos.
Yeah, they're.
So, and then I just read yesterday about the other things he did, like help start Art Forum and a couple of other tiny things. And then the same exhibit was some Avedon, big, you know, portraits, but just on the photography that all coalesces. For me, photography, painting, drawing, printmaking, they're all kind of, all echo.
You've experimented with so many different mediums.
Well, they're interacting. And then Cindy Sherman, Donald Sultan, Stieglitz, Steichen, Ansel Adams and Edward Weston, Sally Mann, Edward Muybridge, and toward 2011, Miroslav Tiki, if you know. So those are just a few, you know, that you feed yourself, you fill the well, and then they influence you, and it comes out. But I had to mention a few of those people I sponged up over my youth. And then, around I had gone to Turkey and Italy and Austria for September of my 30th birthday, my grandmother and my uncle. And I think it was when I got back in 92, that Bay Area figuration, again, by virtue of place and Oliveira and things here in my immediate environment.
Right.
And a lot of them were still alive. It's like, whoa, who are these guys? And a few girls like Joan Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And by then I had my first studio not at home on Nob Hill. And I was first starting like that piece there, hiring my own private models, which is a big deal then for a young artist, like my own private models, not just our group thing, which we continued to do for decades. In a nutshell, to tie directly to this 90s work, the Bay Area figure, I had to think about this, like what influence from, and I'll mention my tops. They helped give me I freed my brushwork.
Yes.
And I felt, there are no rules, you know. You can integrate the figure and the ground or not, whatever, you know, and it's all fictitious. It can be fictitious. And again, with photographs, if I did use reference, it's from my own photographs. I was a stickler.
Right.
So it's your whole work.
I think that's very important.
All yours. So
Yes.
it's filtered. Like I can see a few
Yes.
pieces that were based on my own photographs from a city fair. I also, the melding of the abstract ground and the representational, it gave me permission to, like in David Park's work, or Oliveira, anyway, you could paint, it gave me permission, you don't have to paint a specific person. Like behind Matt right now, there's Cynthia. I didn't know a Cynthia, but I synthesized the Cynthia. There was some drawing of someone under there, and seeing their work and then this face of fear, it's okay. They're like, and I'll call them an autonomous being, a universal person. And then I loved how, and I followed suit, how Diebenkorn, you can make le quotidien, the everyday, the mundane, scissors, cigarettes, and an ashtray.
And David Park with his brush, brush and the,
that's fine. That's
huge.
great.
Yeah.
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
So, and then I know, starting out with John Etudiants Gallery in Davis, the etiquette or the label, because of virtue of that place, UC Davis, it's just the timing, and we all have our timing. What I was making, and then my coincidence of discovering it all went together, and I got into that. Now we're talking about the Bay Area figure, locked into another generation, or they're loose terms for it, you know. I don't even have, but at the time, it fit in, and I was thankful, glad that I had etiquette, affiliation, but I never studied with any of these folks. Oh, and that's what I wanted to say too.
But just by virtue of being in the city and
all
exposing yourself to all that art, it was definitely, it sounded like an influence for you.
Yeah, and
at
also
the time.
It was great for your career.
And it was wonderful to be to be referred to in that context.
Yeah, it was definitely a nice plus.
Yeah.
And I got, I think I mentioned at the opening too, because of John, the night of the opening of his Ocean Park series, Diebenkorn, he was then in a wheelchair and he died soon after. At the old SF MoMA, I got to go to the opening, and shake his hand, and that was really special. And I remember I went right back into my studio, walked back, and I started painting into a head that later, not much later, won the first prize at the Crocker Kingsley. And I called it memorandum. It should have been memorial, but I just made that word up. But, those kind of experiences. So, within the Bay Area figurative, I think you'd ask me who most resonated for me. And I came up with, I could just RCD, Richard Corn, RCD, Diebenkorn, because of his compositional complexities and the variation in media. And I always liked that he drew, painting, collage, printmaking. Maybe not, sculpture, that's okay. I can do everything. And so and Crown Point Press, his prints. So he was multimedia always, and then all the way to abstraction with his final Ocean Park.
And you've worked abstract.
Yeah, in 2015 for my Cautionary Tales
Cautionary
series.
Tales, yep.
But totally different thing. But back to Diebenkorn, a big part of this is all thinking, which I usually don't do in art. It just happened. But the pentimenti, if you don't know that, it's a great term. The underline, what builds up underneath that we see, and you can see all the layers. That was always a magical thing in his work to me, and what I let happen in my work, and I like that. And then David Park, like you were saying, the juicy viscosity of his paint and his kind of brute unfussiness.
Yeah. And the light and dark.
High contrast.
Yeah, high contrast.
And Oliveira more for the spiritual element, I feel, in his work, like the silhouettes. I mean, we would go to the Oakley Museum, I'm sure it's still in their collection, and just stand in front of, it's called Spring from 1962, that pink figure, and just like look at that, like, wow. And it's giant.
So much said with so little.
Well, there's a lot, but it's distilled.
Exactly. And there's lots of, like you said, the information underneath, but then simplified.
And just that spiritual kind of ghost-like
very
component.
Introspective.
And then there are three, Roland Peterson. I liked especially his 60s work, it's just wild, the fluidity of his geometrics and fitting the figure into the spaces he created are always incredible. Raymond Stapperns, and Raymond, I don't know how to say his name. Raymond, you're friends with him. I thought back in 1988 when I was at the Academy on Sutter Street at the Fine Art Department during the break during the day or between classes. There was this old school kind of oversized historical gallery called Maxwell Galleries in the next block. Yeah. And I would go in there again like, ooh, the gallery. And I'd go slip downstairs and they had these god-awful, super bright, hot lights on these very colorful paintings. It's amazing they didn't melt. And I didn't ever say anything, but I thought, oh my God, this is it's bad. But they were Raymond Stapperns paintings, and I would go down there as like I was
his
27.
They are very highly chromatic.
Yes,
but the wrong lighting can make them look.
But they were baking those paintings anyway. But they really, I would go in there like a church, on my break and look at these incredible paintings. Yeah, and lastly, this man named Wayne Thiebaud. I have to say, on the same time in 87, 88, Greystone Gallery was a print gallery. I did not know who Wayne Thiebaud was. And I was drawing in cafes on coffee breaks, just things to practice in your sketchbook. And then I went upstairs in that Greystone one day, and there was a chocolate two-toned print of slices of pie. And I thought, that is so simple, but so elegant. I love that, in my little 27-year-old mind. And then flip ahead. Anyway, those are my, main Bay Area figurative influences and inspirations, and let's see, and just probably just, I'm not aware like painting these composition. I don't plan like Hopper did or something.
You're very intuitive.
It's just all happens.
And
it's unconscious and intuitive, but and then you find it. You just find it.
It's a feeling. It sounds like. Yeah.
And letting the process, I guess, take over rather than being an artist that makes a sketch.
And again, it's
everybody's
sort of like
different.
you have the rules, you have a toolbox.
Yeah, they were in. Yeah,
exactly. You internalize that,
Yes.
and then you almost need to let them go in order to then really respond to what you're doing
at
the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the case, what I said earlier,
and you get that internal aha that's working.
As you're doing it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Because you've internalized and learned and looked and lived, and then it has hopefully comes out.
And it comes out on your in your work. And I was going to ask you, you talked about your photography, and I have found we exchange photographs, and I don't know if I know also in probably Facebook or if whatever, and your postings. And Kim, you know she's a great painter, but she's also a very gifted photographer and collage artist and many other mediums, printmaker. But I am familiar with the photographs because she'll send me these pictures, and they're just really evocative and moving. I've been very moved by your pictures, and compositionally, they're always unexpected. That's the other thing I find in your work. It's something, you can have, like you said, a simple object become something beautiful and composed so well, but there's always going to be something unexpected. And I think in your figurative work, but your photography too. And so I was going to ask you, I think you've talked a little bit about that, how photography and all these other mediums, they sound like they just interplay together. And one kind of bounces off the other and is a jumping board to the other, and they all kind of mix around.
Exactly, they do. It's called, I remember early on, and I was thinking about this because when we were talking, you kept talking about being a painter, and I've never
that's interesting.
I'm not a painter. I'm not just a drafts person, not a printmaker, not a photographer, not a mixed media. It's like it's interdisciplinary. And when
artists.
You just, they all go together. Yeah. And then just to put it in context, like these halcyon days, meaning halcyon, like you're healthy and idyllic and kind of young and untroubled in ways. That's how, and I like what John Seed actually in his essay wrote. What was his last, the end? I had to look up actually halcyon, but what was that? The assertive mix of innocence and sophistication. This is his last sentence on the essay on this halcyon little world in here. Sorry, the assertive mix of innocence and sophistication in Frohsin's paintings from her halcyon days is as charming today as it was 30 years ago, given all that has happened in the world since, maybe even more so. And I had to think, charming, But it is, it's like, the words are like, it feels pure and authentic to my youthful self and autobiographical, and I can see the direct starting to work with personal models and having little stories that come out and working from life, and then it distilling through you and then coming out as something like la jalousie, jealousy between these two women. I don't know, I wasn't jealous, I don't know why that was that, but and then toward about 97, I started to like you're saying, I want to, whether it's photography, I want to not have the label and just, you start finding your own voice more so, And like recently, Peter Campion, who's a poet and writer, he's in Minnesota now. He heads the poetry department. He asked me to provide imagery for Revell. It's a literary magazine for the summer. And it took me 2 weeks to go through all the different series that I started making, because I became more like working in series, all based out of life, whether it was the death of your dog or swimming at night. It went into the work, or cautionary tales, upset because of all the overdevelopment 10 years ago.
Doesn't that seem simpler, like simple times now?
And but yeah, so anyway, yeah, I became, working in series and different things. But what Peter brought up, when I had to keep showing him different, down to 12 different images of artwork over the last 20 years, he said, Kim, it's going to be hard to choose what to plug into the literary content, but every piece, no matter whether it's, a pinhole, mixed media thing, or a drawing, or a head study, it's Frohsinian. And I thought, I've never seen that. That is a new etiquette label I like. Thank you, Peter. So we had what's going to be distilled, which is great for me, because it made me happy, because I curated my own curation, and then he bounced off of it to say, okay, because I said we've got to have a continuum, but show the diversity. And he said, I think we can do that if we do pairings. So working through email, and we got it down to 12, and I like that little adjective, because it kind of was like, oh, okay, good, it'll work.
Frohsinian.
And then on that note too, it's great too, I didn't say it, but after in the late 90s, and after literature and audiobooks and poetry like Emily Dickinson, film, all these things we haven't talked about, beside these great artists and influences in the visual arts, they also wash through. Right. And they've been really important. Like you even, the Dolby Chadwick show, 2 Minutes and Counting, those are all based on, because I loved short stories at the time. Raymond Carver, Tobias Wolff, and all that. That went right into all those little gestural 2 Minutes and Counting. And then the titles, if you look in that book, they have to do, I dedicated the book, I think, to Emily Dickinson and some other, and the models. But yeah, just they're all lots of different elements that go into these.
I was thinking, you are truly the real deal, the artist, the artist of art for artists, and truly it.
Nice.
And it's my pleasure to know you
so
and
much.
to be your buddy.
Thank you. I'm thankful for you.
And so I think opening up for questions, does that make sense?
Anyone
Anybody have any questions?
I can't even keep track.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes, Ron?
There's a few things that you're talking about with regards, because I feel like there's, when you talk about references, especially to photographers as well, I feel like the artwork, there is a story there, and then there's a character there, and I'm curious how, because I also see you approaching it from a formal point of view, whether it's composition or color, and so it's sort of like, at what point does one take over the next, right? Like, because I mean, you may come to a story, but then the formal aspect of the image actually takes over. And I was just curious how you navigate that, or do you start with one and then go to the other, or do you just sort of move between the two, or you try and obfuscate the story, right? Or
it just, it just happens. I don't even know. And again, this is looking at these works from 30 years ago, the backstories. I actually look at it now, and I can tell it's always in my titles. They're kind of cryptic, but and these are very simple titles I've looked at in here, like Dog People. But I can see, you know, formally, I'm not, as I said earlier, I'm not planning these. They just emerge, and it's the process that creates them, and you paint in, you paint out. So I don't really start with a big story. It's more I would start with an emotion. Like I think now I'm like looking like, what's this about? But I know that it has to do putting our dog to sleep, and maybe this stands for my ex-husband, and then we've been on a trip, but we're not in that kind of vehicle. I don't know. And then that underlining, because it comes from candlelight, because I had been working with candles. So, yeah, that's, there's no set methodology. And
so really allowing the subconscious to come in.
yes,
Is what it sounds like.
yes. But there is conscious thought. I mean, some of them are more based in a reality, like that work on paper. It's called Troop, I think. And it's because I worked from my own, and then I improvise, of course. A photograph from shooting at this urban fair. But those are all kind of reduced and fictionalized and Bay Area figuratized. I've never said that in my life, but I'm saying it right now, looking at it, and simplified. And then, for example, I don't know how this showgirl, I don't know where she came from, probably my imagination, and maybe I saw something at the fair. I'm not sure. But again, when we were saying what's a recurrent, I sat in here about a week ago by myself. I wasn't planning on it. It just happened. And I thought, just because this is usually in the center. I thought, okay, like an objective look. And over time, I can see how, blue is intrinsic to my palette and my art when in painting. And then high contrast, how I see even in photography, so important, the light and dark and that play. And, you see my photographs even on the phone. Every one is that I put out in the world, I've edited, I've tweaked, I've painted, I've drawn. They're not just like, ooh, I think I'll put that. I think about it, and I compose it, and I crop, and it's just instantaneous. You have to. Yeah. I mean, that's otherwise, Yes, ma'am.
You didn't mention much your quick gestural drawings, which have always grabbed my eye as
Oh, yeah.
watched you do them. At an amazing speed, you can capture the figure just like that, and just like Picasso could draw the bull in 6 lines, you could capture the figure instantly. And I was struggling just to get the contour, and you already had it nailed. I know it comes with practice, but you have a unique skill.
Well, thanks, Meredith, and you do live with some drawings, and that has been, no matter what did I used to call it? It's like a baseline practice. I used to have a quote by Martha Graham on the wall. Practice is inviting something desired. I don't know, maybe somebody knows. But anyway, no matter if I'm 10 years ago doing paintings about traffic cones and all abstract work for a year and a half or whatever, the subject matter has nothing to do with the figure. That figure drawing practice was like a heartbeat. I have to have that.
But then you developed a lot of them into really amazing.
Right.
Well, you add, I remember once, I think it was early on, after my private drawing sessions, like, I'm left with all these drawings. And that's when I would start adding ink and acrylic. And to answer your question, stopped painting in oil and went more into water-based media because that's immediate on paper. And then I just gradually shifted to all water-based media by the end of the 90s and gave all my oil paint to Nicholas Coley because he helped me move, he got a bag. Anyway, it helped me move my storage unit.
I wish I were around then.
It was a lot of pain. He's lucky, but he helped me. And the gesture, and then the models who would do all kinds of things for me, stand on their heads literally, hands.
Yeah.
And that was what I liked, you know, and any themes I would come up with, movement, floating, inversion. Death and dying, actually, in 2011 or 12, I had a show all based on, I can't believe it, yeah. And they simulated all kinds of themes. But that gesture, how we all start, yeah, that was really important. And it gives you your fluidity. Yes, Paul?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I think you two have given us a wonderful conversation
Thank you.
Thank you.
and real insight. Well, much more than I brought to this, and walk away with more. Another question, one question I was going to ask was, and you got started on that, so I'll just say it.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in knowing more about that painting.
Mm.
And it's easy for all of us to see.
Yeah, it's kind of like front and center.
You know, you did enough on that.
Okay.
But I think more important for me is your commitment to realism, whatever
Yeah.
that may be. And that's,
Yeah.
there are many kinds.
Mm-hmm.
Your commitment is clear. But I wondered if it was continuous, if you never did look around. Were you ever interested in exploring other modes?
Of
Like,
in the creative,
no,
oh, that they're all. You mean like being a filmmaker? What do you mean? I don't know. What do you mean? Like another? Well, I actually, even that is based in reality. My most, I was just letting Lauren know because she saw some traffic cones back in 2015. My third studio in my career was at the Noonan Building in Pier 70, and if you remember, that was when what we now know as Mission Bay was all, and before the Chase Center. I was going out there and it was like whoosh, us and the pigeons and the old, World War II, before Restoration Hardware took over that corner building. Let me tell you that. There were still stones and bricks in the street. And then I just saw it one day, I was just like overnight, I couldn't even get through town. There were traffic cones and overdevelopment, and they were, just bulldozing the whole, dog patch, all of it. And I don't know. And I just, one day, and that's the word that was important to me, epiphanies. For each of my series, there's usually an epiphany. And I can distinctly remember I was behind a truck, again in traffic, and here, trying to get across North Beach to my studio. I thought, what is going on here? And I just saw red, white, red, white. And I thought, this is just ubiquitous. And it just was like, and that started a year and a half's worth of abstract, for me, work, even though I had within that cone paintings that became figuration, like little, and using spray paint, and I was out in the field culling detritus and integrating that in the work. But that was my most abstract, and also like a not political, but, social reaction to something.
Yeah.
It had a definite
You had a
theme. And it's
message.
called Cautionary Tales.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just my kind of.
I remember
Like, what's
seeing
going
that
on?
show, and I really seeing the abstraction, because it was abstract, but it's still the way I've always kind of observed maybe Richard Diebenkorn, where I will always see a landscape in his abstractions,
Something.
even though he will say it's an abstract. I always would see,
I'd say,
not quite jumping off that fence of realism
Sure.
or representation. So I think even in that work in abstraction, I still see you kind of on that.
there
Yeah,
was
you
a
haven't
reality.
jumped quite over that fence yet, or
Yeah.
off it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
never. I guess
Don't
I
you
never
think?
felt the true need.
Yeah.
That sounds right to me.
Thank you, Paul, the art
Joan?
historian and art writer.
You're such a burden.
John?
Yeah.
Well, I need help with the timeline, Kim, but you seem to be keeping your life timeline. My own collection of Kim's, which I love, are of two themes. One is a series of nudes, often in ballet poses, which makes me think it must be when you had your own model, or you're using your own model.
Probably, yeah.
And I was telling Greg at another show in January, well, I have a whole bunch of Kims, and I didn't even know it. I think I have 8 framed at home, mostly of that. But then there's another theme, which unfortunately I gave to all my children. I'll have to get them back. But they're little kind of postcard size of, it's a horse series.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very painterly. They're quite
Those are,
thick.
mm-hmm.
And my daughter Hannah, who is a fine artist who incidentally lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and is painting to get ready for a show in New York
Oh, the musician.
September.
Wow.
And this is really crazy. My daughter, who lives in Atlanta and is a painter, is going with her husband and daughter to Aix-en-Provence in June for a painting course.
Somebody
Oh, my gosh.
What is going on here?
That is a lot of
I
serendipity.
always loved your work.
Oh, thank you,
But
John.
Can you place when we were kind of interacting and you were incredibly generous with me and
Oh, vice versa.
Sure.
No, yeah, the horses, and again, art coming out of lived experience. I've always, growing up in Atlanta, we were near Chastain Park. My mom is very, hey, horsey, goes up to a horse and pets him. I've always been afraid of horses, and she can just like pat him on the, like a dog. But finally, in 2007, I was in Telluride, and they were all laughing at me because I went on a horse on a trail ride with my little niece and nephew, and they were like, oh, and I thought, this is like a dog. I'm just fine. And came back, and horses showed up in the artwork. And then I shot my own imagery of my friend then Julie Escherick riding one of the Park Service horses in a ring, and I used probably all that subject matter and the horses from Telluride in that horse work.
so that sort of.
And I think like 2007, yeah. And then you do have a lot. I remember before you all moved out of that huge Queen Anne up on your Buena East,
Buena Vista East.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You did this interesting installation of a lot of the figures really close together. Like, yeah,
Over the years,
that was interesting.
Yeah.
That was great.
We now rent the carriage house right next to the big house,
Yes.
which was getting ridiculous with our kids all home.
It's a work of art.
Or neighbors.
So
Anyway,
yeah, thank
fun-
you. That's
Fun stories,
interesting.
fun memories.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Anybody else? Any questions on
I think there's one here.
chronology of these?
Kim,
Huh?
I think one over here.
Hello.
So your works are pretty much like alla prima, like when you get in your studio. So it's
They were done. Yeah, it's just
So
in the
painting-
studio. Yeah.
so painting like a cappella. You just use
Yeah.
the-
Yeah. Studio, sur le vif, as they say, right? Yeah. And then, of course, and then reworking, but it's all, it's not like I'm out. I mean, I've done plein air work, but not as a plein air artist. I never wanted to, but you take the outside in. And then, yes, working directly on paper. Last year's over on my a table.
Do you ever work outside?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, drawing outside
On
and
location?
yeah. But now I'm drawing some flowers in the backyard, geraniums and daffodils and cyclamen.
They're beautiful.
Do you keep your you use like a maul, or are you just going with your?
No, I've never used that tool or anything like that. Maybe one day. No, just my hand, eye.
So you're trusting the force.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I know I got here a little later, but I was curious, which painters have influenced you?
You could read the list really quick.
Yeah, I could. Goodness.
But I'm surprised. I didn't see-
Everything from
I
actually
see
when.
Stephen Cohen on that list, yeah.
Yeah. In the out of that particular grouping, back in the 90s when I first discovered, it was Stephen Korn, Bischoff, Roland Peterson, Oliveira, David Park, and
Joan Brown?
not so much Joan Brown. I mean, I admired her slab, and my gosh, how did and actually Jada Feo, even though she's not part of that. Yeah, and just Joan Brown too. That all the variety, and her.
Yeah, she really changed her
yes,
style over time.
and but then her early paintings are very different. Then she's like the last show as
And
a
the
MoMA.
swimming women.
Yeah, that's autobiographical. She's a swimmer.
Yeah, I know.
You know,
You've done.
yeah,
bit of
and
that,
like that's another example of putting your own life and your biography in the work. Is about 10 years ago, I started nightly swimming at the Bay Club, and 25 pounds ago, it totally became like this spiritual, healthy thing at the end of at night. And then it showed up in the paintings of water, and I'd shoot images of the lanes, and then that went into the artwork. Yeah. And then it even surfaced because I was doing the cautionary tales. So I've got all these reds and like caution, but always in a lot of them, there's a little rectangular square of blue. And I know in my life, that is my pool, but it's reduced to a little symbol. And that's balances, and that's in some of the titles. I can't think of right now. But yeah, RCD influenced me.
It seems like your David Park, your people, really, your images of people, really their faces are a lot like David Park.
Well, yeah, that's, I was just saying that instead of feeling for so long, is even drawing, that has to be Rita or Michelle or Jennifer, I kind of obliterate their, all the details. And seeing their work gave me that free license to do that. Even though I knew, but I had to know that I could draw Rita, Michelle, or Jennifer underneath that.
Right.
I had to know that. And not, but yeah, that's when I started doing the free in the 90s, just painting over a drawing. It's like, that's done. But then I got all these drawings. Let me make use of the paint and the ink.
Very resourceful, Kim.
So it led to all this kind of thing, yeah. And I had a fellow, an artist. He just told me he's 76. He seemed very, very youthful. He visited me the other day, and we were looking at these. He goes, "You just gave me an idea to work over my drawings." I was like, It was like a revelation. He's like, "This is my takeaway for the day. I'm so inspired." I said, "Yeah, you have your cannon farter. You've got your armatures.
You've got your composition done. You've got your you're all ready to go."
So that was just 2 days ago, yeah. So
How was being married to another artist, a painter,
it was
fabulous in his own right as a landscape and cityscape painter?
Well,
How
Randy-
did that influence you, or did it? Or?
well, he didn't start out doing. This is my late husband, Randall Sexton, and unfortunately, he has.
And I took a workshop from him, and I knew we have a knew Randy.
Mhm.
I met him and didn't know you were married, and then it found So you were not married at that time when I first met. Yeah.
We were together 87 to 2000.
Yeah.
Or 99.
So it was after I met
Right.
him. Yeah.
It was very important. I mean, I knew, and he was working at Michael's art, talking about, art supplies. I was like everywhere. And he was working at Michael's when I was at the Academy of Art. And I would go down there and buy my supplies as a student. And my mom had given me this zirconian ring. And I wore it here. he always thought I was married, and we had this thing. And he's like, I never wanted to ask you for coffee or anything because I thought you were married. I was like, no, that's not even real. Anyway, long story short, yeah. And he had gone to the University of Connecticut and had a BFA, bachelor's, and he was the Yankee and I was the Southerner, and that's what the joke for years, like we'd go to Connecticut and Atlanta or San Diego for my family, but it was very important to have a co-creative mind. Even though he was not able to be a full-time artist until later, he always had to have a day job, and he worked at, and he was at the Shorenstein Theaters, anyway. And, but that's to go together and feed each other creatively where we looked and took road trips and went to art shows, or who's this Ansel Kiefer, when we drive to LA to see the show together, to have that common interest and bond and commonality is like a main cement, glue. And he then, that's funny you bring that up. I don't know when it was. It was probably it was the early 90s. Yeah. I bought him a plein air easel. He had never owned one. And I had bought myself one. And we would go out, and I ended up giving him mine because I thought, I am a studio artist. I am not going out and these bugs and this
Exactly,
paint
right.
and
Right.
the water,
The wind.
this is not my thing. I'm giving you my easel. And so he had both. And then the history, he became that. And actually, early on, I would go as a passenger and absorb as my kind of being my artist in 90, or maybe before the earthquake. Anyway, we drove to Scottsdale, Arizona, hot as hell, for Milt Kobayashi, his first ever workshop. And I was out in the heat with our dog and trying to escape it in a mall. And then the next one, we drove to Michael Lynch, who is a mentor to him, in the middle of New Mexico, and stayed for the week in a yurt on the property. And he went and, like years later, he would become a workshop, teacher, and people would come to him. We went to things like that for him. And I was along for literally the ride. It was my Azuzi Trooper, but it was great because while he's in there doing his thing, I'm out with the dog scoping the landscape and taking it back because I know how I operate. Yeah. It's not a loss at all. It's all a gestalt, and I could bring it back to the studio. So it worked really, really well. I mean, I'm going to start crying if I keep talking about it. But it was really, yeah, that was very...
His work is wonderful.
Yeah. But he started out, he started out abstract painter.
Really?
Yeah. And he still, last time I saw him, he's always kept this one, I hope his wife kept it, anyway, this long horizontal abstract painting that he did in our flat. And I said, that's really good, Rainey. That's a keeper. And he always kept it. And when I saw his last studio up in Benicia, I don't know, like 3 or 4 years ago, he was up in the corner. He still had kept it. Mm-hmm. And then he went on to be, a plein air realist and worked in the studio too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of history, a lot of story, a lot of bonds and influences and cross-pollination and autobiography. And actually that painting too, on a different note, it's called Her Appreciation. And I think I knew when our story was ending, that's kind of emblematic, symbolic, looking at it in retrospect. But that's fine, he's in there. And yeah, so I'm glad you asked about that. Yeah.
I think there's one more.
Okay. Hey.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the talk. It was very insightful. I have 2 questions about your painting process. First is, I'd like to know how you know you're done with your painting?
When are they finished?
I feel like it's difficult to decide when to finish.
I think that's the
Well,
most
yeah,
frequently asked question.
or any artwork, like over my career, it's not just about a painting, but you don't know, maybe you don't know the work, but I did like 4 years of these layered number paintings that have myriads of layers using just tape, and I'm not even using brushes, and I'm using power tools, and that was like 2010 to 13. And like, how do you know? And something that's super, not just surface, it's multi-surfaced. And I just know. It's just, again, not to overuse the word intuition, or else just like, I'm done. You know, of course you can feel that too. I don't want to because things can get overworked. But another example, it's very personal, but that scary looking head that I framed for myself, I don't care if it ever sells, it's just, it was important in '94. It was something that I couldn't, talking about completion, I was toiling with whatever was on this. It was a work on paper and I framed it as a painting, but I couldn't get there. And that's why it turned into black and gray. And I just like, I'm not going to give up on this. And then it turned into what I call the face of fear, like your fear of like, what am I doing? And I just left it as that. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's a whole other direction, and that didn't happen. That does not happen very often. It did not, but that is a different kind of answer, rather than going in the trash or getting overworked or whatever. But when something just, I don't know, I don't have a word for it. It just kind of tells you. And I didn't have a really. With Randy, we didn't say, like, I'm sure some couples or people like, is this finished? Or, you know, we didn't operate like that. This looks good. It's good. But there's a different kind of feedback, but not like, oh, don't do anymore. But that's okay. Yeah.
When I submit to my class, I don't feel like, when I feel like I'm completing the work, I don't feel like confident to submit it. And I guess in your case it's public, so it's a bigger role. How do you balance your like intuition or feel and expectation of the world?
Your inner gaze and your own self-judgment, or the judgment of the outside. Well, I think that comes with age, because more when you're younger, you're wondering, is this palatable? But honestly, and I guess maybe it was instilled in me at a younger age, or even if you're a writer, it's like, what is my audience? Do they care? I don't know, you just do it. I don't know, I don't. The outside judgment of whether something's good or finished, whatever, that, I don't think that should dictate.
You know, Kim, when
really
I see your work,
I just don't, because otherwise I would just sculpt you.
I feel like
It's your own inner judgment is hard enough.
when I look at your work, one of the things I have always resonated with me is that I feel like you are not painting for an audience. You are painting for yourself, and exactly what you're. So I'm not going to answer her question for her, but I know there is a difference between when you're, kind of painting for the market, and oh, this one's going to sell, or this one, if I use this color, it may be more appealing to my gallery or something. Whereas your work, I've always felt. When I first saw it, and even up to anything you produce now, it is so authentically her work painting for herself, and that may be, and that's that confidence piece where I see in your work such confidence. You're making your mark making, your finishing everything. It's just like there's confidence. And even in work that feels, maybe you felt that wasn't finished, or you couldn't finish it, or it took a while, or whatever that was, but you still, you know, it wasn't like you went back on it and said, oh, well, if I put a
gonna
little
edit this
blue in
for you.
here, it'll
No, I don't.
resolve, or it'll become something
Yeah.
the market may want.
No, I've never operated like that.
And it probably is age, or, you know, maybe,
Yeah.
or an experience too.
Yeah, that's what I'm just
Yeah.
saying. That's more of a mentality. Yeah, I just have to follow your own like voice,
You always make your opinion authentic.
earnestness. I don't know the word. Being
Authentic
true.
is good.
Yeah.
I think we'll have to leave it there.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so
y'all
much,
for
Kim.
listening.
Thank you,
you,
Kim.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.